Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining here today at Dreamforce. Today I'm going to talk about improving your user experience with Lightning App Builder. So before I get started, I'll just make sure you don't make any purchasing decisions based on any forward-looking statements I may make in this presentation. I don't think I have any, but just in case. My name is Daniel Hoekst. I lead a team here at Salesforce that builds internal apps and that's used to publish content to Trailhead. So we have an internal Salesforce app that we use to publish all of the badges and modules that you might be completing on Trailhead get managed through that Salesforce app. And I'd like to talk to you about that journey today. But before I talk about that, I want to start with a thank you. So thanks to everybody here for joining in person at Dreamforce. It's been great to see everybody. The Salesforce community is really a special place in my heart. I've been part of the community for a long time and excited to share what we've learned in building these apps and hopefully pass it on to others. So I talked about that my team builds an app on Salesforce that's used to manage Trailhead releases. And I'd like to talk about that app in terms of how we modified it to improve our user experience for all of our writers and editors on Trailhead. So here is an example of our app that we manage. You can see a badge here, and that badge then gets published to Trailhead. And we manage the whole production process right inside of Trailhead. So before we launched our redesign of this app, it was a wall of fields. Some of you people may be familiar with what this you might have some records that look like this as well. You have hundreds of fields, scrolls and scrolls forever. We had lots of processes that were supported by some automation on the same object. It was confusing. You didn't quite know which fields needed to be updated at the right time. And we had a lot of questions about what users needed to do. You know, so many clicks. They had to click on everything and to get there. So what did we do to improve that UX? So the first thing we did was we looked at our design principles, we looked at our roles and processes, and we said, what do people need to do in the app at the point that they need to do it? So we really evaluated, and we talked about personas and said, what does a writer need to do at this point? What does an editor need to do at this point? And we talked about what are the things that they need right in front of them to get moving forward. The other thing we looked at was, how can we simplify our object structure? Like, what fields do we need? Do we need to even divide that up? So we ended up actually dividing our objects into a couple of different ones to support our needs here. Rather than having one giant object that had a lot of fields, we realized that we were supporting different processes in one object and split those into multiple objects, simplifying the experience for the user. Then we really took a look at the user interface and said, what are the things that people need? And so we looked at things like path, and I'm going to really highlight a lot of these things in the coming presentation about like some of the different components and how they help us in our app. So we looked at all these different areas to see what are the things that people need and what components, out-of-the-box components, can we use to support that. And how can we dynamically show just what's needed rather than display everything that they might possibly need at once. So here's what it looks like now. So you can see very little scrolling. We have, and I'm going to talk about all the different areas, but basically we are bringing to the front just what they need at this point. So this is a release badge, and so we can see on this page a bunch of things about analytics and bugs that might be on it. Let's dive into that a little bit. So up top, we have our highlights panel. So the critical thing about the highlights panel is that this is going to show us up to 7 fields for our, I already forgot, and it's not on my notes, so I'm not going to tell you. But anyways, we got 7 fields. We show up to 7 fields here. And then we also have our dynamic actions. And so the dynamic actions will let us show different buttons at different points in time. So in this example, we have a start writing. So you've got a badge, you've planned it, and now you're going to start writing that badge. So what are you going to do with it? So from there, we can say when a certain situation, so when it's in plan status, then we're going to show the start writing button. If it's not in plan, we've already moved past this point that they're going to start writing, so we can keep that action from even being shown to our users. So think about that in terms of, like, say if you have an opportunity and you're moving an opportunity forward in stages, there might be a time where you want to create a quote, but earlier in the process, you may not want to create a quote yet, right? So, or maybe you've gotten past the point of creating a quote, so take that create a quote button off the page. and it gives less confusion to the users so that they can't see it anymore. So in this example on your right, you'll see that we have 2 different badges in different statuses, and they have different buttons that are available to you. So that really focuses the user on what to do next. All right, next up are tabs. They're pretty simple. You see them on all our pages, but I just wanted to highlight that tabs are really important for a couple of reasons. One is that they improve your loading time. So if we're going to put the most important things on the front of your the tab that's your default is going to load. Those things are going to load. Everything else in the background on the other tabs doesn't load right away. So your pages will be more responsive and load faster. So we want to only show the things that we expect the user is going to need, and we can do that with our tabs. So we can hide those slower loading things that maybe people don't use as much in another tab so that it speeds up our page performance. From there, then what we want to do is we said, well, let's create some dynamic related lists. So in my example here, for this badge, we've a release badge. So now we want to know if there's any problems with that badge. And that's a pretty important thing that we want to know is what are some issues that might happen. So in this case, I have a dynamic related list right on the page in the side panel here that's going to show us what are my open bugs. So I can see exactly which bugs are the ones that need action, and I can see the status of all those bugs at once and know exactly what's needed next on this badge. So we think about that from other objects that you might be using. Let's say you're on a case, right? So if you have one case, your support agent, that account may have multiple cases, or that contact may have multiple cases open. You could have a related list that looks up to the parent object and pulls out the other cases that are open for that same user account, contact, etc. So similarly with sales, you could have opportunities or leads. You can think about different ways that you can dynamically show other things that might be of interest that are not necessarily directly related to that object. And then the next thing we have is a related record. So in this case, we are pulling in a parent record so this badge has something called a content version. And so we can pull in this lookup. There's a lookup field on the badge. We can pull in that field and pull in information from that object, and they can edit it without leaving the page. So again, if we talk about some standard objects that might be in Salesforce, think about your opportunity. You have your opportunity looks up to an account. You could put a little, you can add this related records widget component to your page and show the relevant fields from the account and let people edit things on the account while they're still on the opportunity page, so they don't have to go back and forth between the 2 records and edit those things. So it keeps them in one place and really shows them the fields that are relevant to them in that moment, rather than showing everything that might be related to that record. Path. So path is really, really helpful for something that goes through a process. And it's a great visual indicator to tell you how much is left in that process and what you need to do. And in this case, you can see we have some guidance for success. And the guidance for success is telling us what needs to happen next. One thing I'm not showing in the screenshot is that we can also display up to 5 fields that are important for that process. We actually decided not to do that because those fields, you can't make them required, and you can't really, they're suggestions. Go populate this field. We solved that through the use of dynamic forms instead, where we could then choose to make them required, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But you can display up to 5 fields in your path to show what are the fields that may need to be updated. But your path doesn't make you can't make the field required, for example, on the path, so there has some limitations on that. All right, so now once we've got dynamic forms. I alluded to it in the last discussion, last slide. And we use the dynamic forms here to split our page layouts into logical sections. So we have an overview. These are the things that are like the top. These are not all the fields on the badge. There's a lot of data that we need, but it's not relevant at this point. So instead what we've done is we've taken that and we've hidden it in the details section. So we have put those extra fields over in details, And they are out of the way, but they're there if you need to get to them. So if somebody, you're not hiding them entirely, you're just saying, hey, for this badge in this current stage, these are the types of fields that you might need to see. Let's see. All right. So here is an example of a dynamic form. So we have our badge art status. We've changed it to submitted. We're going to mark the content submission status as complete, and we're going to hit save. At this point, what you're going to notice is that when this page refreshes, we're going to have a brand new set of fields. We've already submitted our content. There's no need to, like, that stage in the process is now complete. So there's nothing else that we need to do there. And instead, we're going to now give the field that we need to assign an editor, and then that field pops up. Once we've assigned the editor, then other fields pop up. So we are processing them through this, all in using dynamic forms. And every time you're on, you come to that page, you see the fields that are required. We could also do this with something like a flow. So if you had like different types of things that you wanted to do, you could have some buttons and click a flow, have different flows that might do different things and give you required fields. In this case, we found that dynamic forms were more helpful because it's what the UI looks like. You don't have to click an extra button to go in and navigate to that flow and then follow the process. So we're really using the dynamic forms to move us through. So again, we have our full view and are related to get into the details, but we have everything up front that we think you might need, and this is where it's really important to talk about your user. You want to do interviews with your users, find out what's the information they need at that time, and put that up front so they don't have to go clicking and deep down into it. So let's put it all together, right? So we've walked through all of these various components, and we now have a complete page, right? So up in the top, we're going to have our highlights panel with our dynamic button, dynamic actions that are going to show us different things to do at different steps in the process. We have our path, which is going to tell us where we are in that process, and it's collapsed right now in this screenshot, but you can have your guidance for success telling you what you need to do next. Then we have our dynamic forms in the main panel, and that's going to just show us different fields at different times that are needed. And then I didn't talk about analytics, but in this case, we can also embed charts right in our pages so that we can see some sort of, what's valid, what's important to you, and you can have your analytics that are displayed about this particular thing. So we could talk about on account, for example, put on your account page, some details about if they're what their opportunities, what open opportunity amounts they might have. You could have some statistics about service. So like how many cases do they have? What's their, if you have some customer satisfaction, you could have all of that in the analytics right there on the front of the page. And then over in the sidebar, we have those dynamic related lists. So thinking about what are the things that are most important. So in this case, we've got open bugs. I talked about on accounts, you might have, on an account, sure, you've got a list of opportunities, but you really are probably only really working those open opportunities. So looking at what open opportunities do I currently have? What are the open cases that I have on that account? And having those right on that homepage for the users. And then down on the bottom is our related record, which is going to have our most recent content version, which is just a lookup field to some other object. And remember, from there, you can also have it be a parent. So, from this, like, what are some key takeaways? Like, if you walk away from this session, what would I want you to say? Oh, this is what I learned. Talk about your roles and your processes. So, what do your users need to do? What are the processes that the users need to follow? And what things do they need in that point in time? Think about your simplicity. So, bringing the specific fields forward, and we want to just reduce clicks, right? So whatever they need, put it on that front page, and hide the things that they don't need necessarily, down below. And then finally, we can use the conditional, use conditions and dynamic features to expose really what's relevant for a certain part of our record and the process that goes along with that. So that's my presentation today, and I have a few minutes for questions, and I'm also open to later. But before I, ask for questions, please provide some feedback. I'd love to hear what you thought about this session and how we could improve it and for the future. So thank you all. So, okay. Questions?
Thank you for watching. We would love to get your opinion on this content, so please leave us some feedback on the comments section below. If you did like this content, give that like button a tap, and of course, if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the Salesforce Admin's YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about being a Salesforce admin in general, head on over to admin.salesforce.com. Thanks again.